SCORE Northeast Wisconsin and WHBY are pleased to bring you Biztalk, a chance for you to hear from entrepreneurs and professionals as they share their experiences. From starting to sustaining growth, learn the skills needed for your business to be successful. If you miss anything, you can catch the Biztalk podcast at score.org/Northeast Wisconsin. And now from the Myron Construction Studio, it's Biztalk on WHBY.
Well, good morning and happy Saturday, everyone. This is Rick Sentz along with Megan Mulholland, and we are with you today on WHBY, and this is Biztalk with SCORE. And Megan, welcome to the show. I don't know if you and I have co-hosted together yet.
No, I have not co-hosted yet with you. I've only done with Terry.
All right. Well, Megan is one of our new co-hosts, and we're excited to have rounded out the lineup here. And I think we have a great show for you today. I'm going to introduce Britni Walz and Jenny Riggle, who are with the LIFToFFS Learning program. And Britni is Chief Impact Officer, and Jenny is Chief Innovation Officer. Britni, Jenny, welcome to the show.
Yeah, we're so excited. Thank you so much for having us both, Megan and Rick.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. We're excited to talk about our programming today.
Well, if you both would be willing to share your professional backgrounds with listeners, what paths that led you to LIFToFFS Learning, and Jenny, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I born and raised in northern Wisconsin and went to UWL and Madison as well. And then my husband's work took me out to Seattle and then down to Louisville and then back to Wisconsin. So my path in education has been a Wisconsin one, but also just kind of seeing all of the different pieces that are out there for education across the nation. I started out in school counseling and then added some school psychology work, added some building administrator work, and ended up back in Wisconsin and working on LIFToFF. So I've had a lot of different roles across the country in a lot of different schools, and I think regardless of if I was working in a private school or a public school, or if I was working with students with disabilities or working with students who we traditionally considered gifted and talented, what I saw was that a lot of the effort that was being put in from students, from families, from educators, and from our systems were just really not getting us the results that we wanted. And when I say results, we're going to talk about that a lot today because it's not just those academic achievement scores or academic results, but really just that holistic picture of what do we want the future to look like for our kids. And I just knew that there had to be something out there better, some other way of being, an other way of doing as an educational system to get something better not only for our students and families, but also for our teachers, our administrators, and our communities. So we're excited to unpack all those experiences and what led us to that today, Rick.
And Britni, what about your background?
Yeah, I'm also born and raised in northern Wisconsin. So I always like to say, though, I'm from north of Highway 8. So, that always gets a bad rap. But, I came down to UW-La Crosse down here to go to school for biomedical sciences and chemistry, and soon realized I wanted to be a teacher working with students. So became a high school science teacher. Fell in love with data, curriculum, just really the nuances of education, and followed that to becoming an instructional coach and then middle school associate principal. And now with the LIFToFFS Learning Collaborative. And I think, like Jenny, just so many different unique roles that each one kind of lended itself to kind of seeing the whole system and not just my singular classroom as a classroom educator or what's happening in my four walls and what I can control. But then as I, increased my leadership experience across the different systems, just really seeing different aspects of what happens in public and private schools. And I think for me, that realization came just as a parent and, having to sit beside my students my kids, just really thinking like, when do you guys have science? Like, I talk to my kids and they're like, Mom, we don't really have science in elementary school. I'm like, well, as a science teacher, that is not okay. So for me, it was just this passion behind really making sure that our kids have access to critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration, teamwork. So all of those skills that we know are so vital when kids leave our K-12 experience to go on to college, four-year technical, polytechnic, or even the workforce.
All right. And I guess I'll open this to both of you. And maybe, Britni, if you want to start first with this one. What exactly is LIFToFFS Learning?
Yeah, LIFToFFS Learning Collaborative is kind of it was born out of a synergetic force, kind of what Jenny talked about, what I talked about with some of the things that we'd seen across different systems. But really it was just like this collaborative effort between Jenny, myself, some of our coworkers, as well as local superintendents in a lot of our rural communities. Kind of really centering around a problem of practice of, the measures that we're asking our kids to try to hit are really outdated. So when we look at, the ACT, is that really truly the measure of success that we are basing a child's future off of? A lot of times, our businesses were coming towards us, like whether you're in rural education, a lot of your school board members are business owners, and you hear them saying, we have our HR department's worst nightmare are students that can't collaborate. They can't talk to an adult. They can't critically think. They can't problem solve. So it was really just this synergetic kind of coming together of local leaders, Jenny, myself, and some coworkers that said we have to start exploring what's possible for kids. And with the advent or with AI really taking over on November 2022, it was how can we leverage AI? And so that's really where we started, was taking a look at like what platforms use AI to adapt to students' learning needs. And how can we leverage that in the general education classroom so that our teachers are freed up to actually do those critical thinking problem sets. They can actually get kids collaborating, doing place-based learning, project-based learning, more internship experiences. So it was really just rethinking the entire school experience, and that's really what LIFToFFS is. It's no two districts are the same, so it's really meeting the districts, the communities, the boards of education, business owners, industry leaders in the areas to say, what truly do we want from our students, and how do we ensure that our students are future ready?
All right. And Jenny, what about your perspective? Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I second everything that Britt said. But if you're not in education and you're trying to wrap your mind around it, I think what I would just add is just, kind of going back to that analogy of David and Goliath. And let's look at like traditional end of like Goliath. And I think Britni and I have been really clear that Goliath is not the enemy, so I think there's a lot of rhetoric around, we don't like the way that education system is working. So we need to just dismantle it. We need to maybe take it down. We need to destroy it. And I think for Britni and I and our colleagues, it's been more like, what do you do with Goliath, right? Like it needs to be there. It serves our communities. And when you look at a lot of our rural communities, the hospital system and the education system, they're the lifeblood of your community. If you lose either of those essential elements of your community living, your community is in trouble. So it can't be the message about taking down public education or taking down education in general, but we do all have a vested interest in making it into something better. So when you take this group of people and we come together and we have this vision that like Goliath has to change, like we want it to stay there, but we need to come up with something that is much better than what we have. That's kind of the idea of the LIFToFFS Learning Collaborative. Is we also recognize that just a desire to change a system doesn't change a system. So what do we do then? How do you operationalize? How do you get started? How do you band together? How do you get advocacy? How do you get funding? So the LIFToFFS Learning Collaborative is really just that idea. It's a house for innovation in education that not only serves education, but it also serves all of our children, which we should all be invested in. So we do a lot of things with leaders. We do a lot of things with teachers and educators. We do a lot of different activities with community building, but it's all coming back to that vision of we need to demand better for our kids and communities, but we also need to do it in a way that's productive and going to move us forward.
So how exactly does LIFToFFS move a classroom away from passive listening and into the world of meaningful real-world experience?
Yeah, that's really where we are centering on. I feel like when we started, it was, just that vetting process of, okay, do we trust AI, or how much do we trust AI, or how much are we utilizing technology? I mean, the common rhetoric right now is that we should ban technology in classrooms, but it's that passive use, right? When it's just the replacement of a paper pencil, that's not how we want kids to be using technology. So it's really working beside teachers, and we've come up with research kind of behind what we call our 4 core experiences. None of this is actually new in education. So if you were to look at our 4 core experiences, personalized learning, ensuring durable skills, emerging technologies, and really wrapping around this idea of global readiness with inside of inquiry as well. It's not anything new right there, but it's that strategic and it's that very intentional implementation of those 4 core experiences alongside of the teacher's current curriculum. So if you're teaching ELA and you're learning about birds or reading about birds, how can you actually build inquiry, and how can you have students actually going out and finding said birds or observing them and understanding their habitats? It's that ability to kind of put all of our interdisciplinary approaches together and making it meaningful for kids. So kids aren't this factory belt walking from, English to math to science, right? That typical 8-hour class period that we all grew up in. So really it's this idea of how can we flip the student experience so that they can make meaning and they can see how everything is truly connected, so they're vested in it. So they can find passion and interest. Especially as we start to tap into our local industries, business partners, when we start to set up pathways for learning with our students that says, okay, let's see, what do you want to do? And how can we unlock that potential for you to follow those dreams and those passions?
Jenny, what makes the initiative different from other AI in education-based initiatives that are out there right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, Rick, the biggest piece is just kind of walking back to what are you doing with the AI when you put in the AI, like when you put in an AI powered platform or you put in some type of emerging technology that's enhanced with AI. And for us, we've really started with looking at how it's being used, as Britni kind of mentioned, but this was really the basis of our initial pilot. Our initial pilot was asking a group of about 51 teachers across 8 districts to say, hey, we know the why education needs to change. We all agree to that, but we are not 100% sure what it's going to look like. Could you possibly be willing to take some type of a risk with us and partner with us, let us partner with your students to figure out what a future-ready classroom could look like if we told you you could do anything you wanted that is going to benefit your students today, and it's going to benefit them for the rest of their lives. And we were able to take a look and watch that kind of experiment unfold across our school districts and our teachers. And, of course, when you're doing an experiment like that, you are going to see things that you're like, that might not be the direction that we want to go in. And having a traditional education classroom where an AI-powered platform is just plopped into it, we found was really not working for kids. And really what you're talking about when you say, I'm going to take a traditional classroom and I'm going to make it better by giving kids an AI-powered personalized learning platform, sounds great in theory, but what Britni and I and our team has found is that truly all that is customized content. So now you have students who are getting maybe some customized exposure to academic content, but it's not really changing their experience. You still have outdated potentially concepts. You're still lacking on a lot of that global readiness. You're still lacking on a lot of that durable skill development. So I think in the process of doing that experience or that experiment with our classrooms, we were able to see that it's not just about AI unless you've gone back and you've really thought about the structure of your classroom. So something that you may be thinking about is that when we look at traditional classrooms, they're really focused on, as Britt said, that factory model of education based on Taylorism of like the 1910s and 1920s. And if you walk into a classroom, you will typically see that model still in place in the vast majority of classrooms. So we like to start with that first.
Well, it looks like we're at the perfect time to take our break. We'll be back after this, and you're listening to Biztalk with Score on WHBY. And thanks for joining us. Welcome back to Biztalk with Score on WHBY. I'm Rick Sense along with Megan Mulholland today, and you're listening to Biztalk with Score. And our guests this morning are Britni Walz-Chief, Chief Impact Officer, and Jenny Riggle, Chief Innovation Officer for LIFToFFS Learning. We're having a great conversation, but before we get back to that, I'd like to just take a moment to talk to you about SCORE. SCORE Northeast Wisconsin serves a 29-county area in northeast and north central Wisconsin. We have about 30 volunteers, each an expert in their field, offering entrepreneurs no-cost and confidential mentoring. Those areas of expertise include IT, social media, marketing, cash flow, accounting, strategic planning, workflow, human resources, retail best practices, and many, many others. In order to register for a no-cost confidential mentoring session and or to learn more about SCORE Northeast Wisconsin, please visit our website at score.org/Northeast Wisconsin. You can learn more about how the SCORE chapter can assist you with starting and or growing your business, and you can complete an application for a mentoring session. Simply complete the online form and submit it to SCORE. Within a few days, a SCORE mentor will be contacting you to set up a meeting. Remember, SCORE is no cost and offers experts who can offer you assistance in many different areas. To get started, please visit our website at score.org/Northeast Wisconsin. And to support small business people, SCORE Northeast Wisconsin is always looking for new mentors. If you have experience that you would like to share with others, we would love to talk to you. We welcome volunteers with experience in all aspects of business. Small business owners need your help, and your experience can make a real difference to their success. Go to score.org/Northeast Wisconsin, click on the volunteer button, and fill out a short application, and we'll get back to you to explain more. And finally, this reminder about the Biztalk with SCORE podcast. The Biztalk with SCORE podcast brings you the same real-world information and insights from experienced entrepreneurs and business leaders, just like Biztalk with SCORE on WHBY. However, the Biztalk with SCORE podcast is available when you are. So listen and subscribe today, tomorrow, or whenever you want. Available on most podcatchers and podcast apps. So thanks again for joining us this morning on Biztalk, and I'll turn the show back over to you, Megan.
Thank you very much. First, before I go on to my question, I want to say go Eagles, because 3 out of the 4 of us on this call are UW La Crosse grads. So appreciate you, Rick, hooking me up with another great pair of guests, because first guest that I co-hosted was a coffee shop owner, and now I've got some fellow UWL alums. So when you were talking about the bird example earlier, and if students were talking or studying about birds and how you'd relate it from ELA to math, here in the Fox Cities we have a lot of charter schools. That to me, that seemed very similar of a concept or process. How is what you do either similar, different, or enhances what a traditional charter school does?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think, what you're describing, what your own child's experience during those charter programs was really centering around our 4 core experiences that we've talked about, that we kind of center ourselves around, that are based on those research sciences of instructional practices. But what we have seen is that is really happening in that chartered isolation or some of our private schools. So what a lot of our approach was, and how LIFToFFS Learning Collaborative really truly started, was a grassroots effort within our public school system and our rural public school system, right? And so when we think about charter, it's a lot of times choice-based. It's, sometimes there's that cost for families. But what we're really talking about is changing the student experience and guaranteeing that type of experience for every single learner. And I think that's really the difference maker here. So yes, there is those similarities. Obviously, there's parts of our LIFToffs that truly enhance even a charter school, and how we utilize some of our platforms and just data collection and some of our business partners and our pathways of learning. But really at the center of it, it's ensuring that every child, whether you're public, you're private, you're a charter school, has that same learning experience that we know, like your kids could probably tell you how impactful that was as a parent. You're like, heck yeah, that was amazing. I saw my kids' love of learning, but that doesn't necessarily happen for all of our kids. I think the new numbers are saying that Wisconsin ranks like 30th right now, 32 in math and English. And so if we're really trying to ensure that we have an economically viable future for our state as a global powerhouse in a world that's dominated by other nations, how can we truly make sure that Wisconsin stands out in that global economy? And that's by ensuring every child has access to that type of learning, that type of experiential, just immersion that we know truly pushes the limits for what's possible for kids. So I say more than Jenny talked about the David and Goliath example. I always equate it to, school systems oftentimes get into this, like Jenny mentioned, we really haven't changed anything in the public schools since 1910. And so, I mean, other than, you have more than one room schoolhouses. However, really nothing has changed. And I like to equate that to Blockbuster, right? Blockbuster was the cornerstone. It was where we went. They thought they were too big to fail. They felt like they did not need to innovate themselves as a business when times were changing. I think we're at that like hinge point where times are clearly changing. And so now is the chance for us to really rethink what's possible when we redesign and reimagine the school system for all of our learners. Because otherwise, if we're going to be stuck in this 1910 model of instructing students, we're putting students into the workforce, into the global economy that really don't have the skills to succeed, especially when we talk about the changing of careers, 24 different times, I think is the now projected World Economic Forum for students right now. So can't really go back to school 24 times, right? But you need to have those viable skills that can actually transfer across industry to industry.
All right, we're taking our second break at the moment. We will be returning in just a little bit, and you're listening to Biztalk with Score on WHBY, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Biztalk with Score on WHBY. I'm Rick Sense, along with Megan Mulholland this week, and we're having a great conversation with Britni Walz, Chief Impact Officer, and Jenny Riggle, Chief Innovation Officer at LIFToFFS Learning. But before we get back to that, I just want to take a moment to remind everybody about the podcast. Our podcast is available. You can get it where podcast apps, through your podcast app, anywhere that you listen to your current podcasts. Would encourage you to take a listen to the show. It's a great format, and it's just a way to take it with you on your walks, while you're running, all sorts of things that you can be doing while you're listening to us in the background. So just a reminder again, BizTalk with Score podcast app. So with that, I'm going to turn the show back over to Megan. Megan?
Well, thanks. As someone who works in marketing and communications, I know we have a lot of my colleagues, have a love-hate relationship with AI. They think it's great, but then they also worry that it's going to replace them. So how are you addressing the concerns that AI might replace the human element of teaching?
That's a great thing that we've definitely heard this over and over again, Megan, and we've had opportunities to just really think on like a philosophical level, right, as well as like that operational level in the classroom. And I think it's true that there's also a quiet crisis happening in education where we are having a lot of positions that are not being filled, especially in our rural areas with highly qualified educators. The reality is just that it's really difficult to draw high quality talent into some of our very, very rural towns where they might not be able to compensate a lot higher. There might not be a lot of affordable housing opportunities. There might not be a lot of those fun things like different establishments, restaurants, parks, some of those perks of living in bigger cities. So I think it is true that some of our superintendents in particular have wondered if there are opportunities to use AI and artificial intelligence as an emerging technologies to actually support some of those gaps. That being said, when we started to go down that rabbit hole, what we found almost immediately was that some of that gut feeling about like, ooh, this doesn't feel right as a human was also supported by some of our observations in the classroom. Students are going to always want to interact with humans around them when they are there during the day. And given that, even if we were to come up with different types of programs, emerging technology and options that would be able to replace some of that quote unquote human work, Britni and I and our colleagues and the students and parents would always advocate for what's right about education. And that is, it's an incredibly human field. It's a human endeavor, and learning should always be like this human journey, right, that we have for all of our lives. Now, there are definitely some things that we should think about with AI because we believe that AI is an amplifier of human potential. And we think that that's the way that it should be looked at in terms of how we teach students to use it. Now, for very, very simple jobs that teachers might be doing where they do the exact same tasks day in and day out, I think we would question if that's a really good use of their time and talent. isn't that something that we could potentially hand over to some type of AI-driven emerging technology to support them in being relieved of some of those rote task items and doing more creative, complex things with their students? And unfortunately, I'll be honest, a lot of our teachers do operate in times of those like basic just skills in the classroom. A lot of teachers are given things like a curriculum or a pacing guide or a resource, and their job is to simply regurgitate that resource in the classroom. If you ask them why they're doing that because of those outdated measures we talked about earlier, which are standardized test scores. When everyone's chasing standardized test scores and we're all chasing a level of achievement on those scores, the idea is that you could standardize the process to get there. And if you can standardize the process to get to that score, you can use more AI and emerging technology to get there. What we really envision for the future is that if you say that score, that standardized test score, is not a good measure of what we choose for our kids in our program for the future, because we choose true future readiness, we want them to be able to do more than just regurgitate information on a test. You start to look at teaching and learning totally different, because we no longer want standardization. We want complexity. We want creativity. We want there is no ceiling on the types of experience that we want you and your teacher and your students and your administrators and your families to have throughout this K-12 educational journey. So for us, yes, you could absolutely potentially one day replace that standardized type of teaching and learning with just platforms if we don't move away from it. But also, we all believe that that is not the right measure, it's not the right outcome, and therefore it's not the right journey.
So, Britni, I have to ask then, how can AI serve as an equalizer then for students when we talk about this disparity in the rural districts? How does that work with in the geographically isolated areas and districts? How does it become that equalizer?
Yeah, I feel like so long we've talked about the digital divide, right? So a lot of times we talk about kids that have access to broadband internet. We have, one-to-one devices, those that have the computers at home. Now the new digital divide is who has access and who's using and responsibly understanding kind of this idea of the AI and the algorithms behind it. And so really when we take a look at that digital divide as that new geographic isolator, now we have to start to question how can AI be kind of put into the curriculum, into the school experience for students in an ethical and safe way that also respects students' data and the confidentiality behind that. So we're looking at the use of AI for tutoring, right? So when we think about access to tutoring, those that live in a big scale or a big city have access to one-on-one tutoring that their parents can purchase to study for this test or get better at this. Now we can have an AI-powered platform that does that tutoring for that child. We also have this idea that we can bring them access to learning that's never been done before. So, thinking about my rural community, I didn't have access to AP classes. Now we have the ability to offer these AP courses and these courses that students would have never been able to take had they have not had that opportunity to have an AI-powered platform. So not only is it about that platform and giving kids access to education, but it's also about the skills that students are going to need to be able to ethically and responsibly utilize AI. So I know, Megan, you talked about marketing fields. How can we leverage the AI that's a part of Canva? How can students critically examine and be critical consumers of an AI that's produced, right? Go to Gemini, go to ChatGPT and have it make a flyer. Now, how can students actually use some of that critical thinking as a critical consumer of what AI produces? We always say AI is not necessarily going to replace your job, but it's going to replace you with someone that can utilize AI. And so if our rural communities don't have access or they're not thinking about how they're going to use AI in a fashion that really gives students those technological skills to be globally competitive. And now with AI, with emerging technology, we have the ability for students to stay potentially in these rural communities, no longer becoming this geographic, isolation where they can be communicating with someone across the world. They can be leveraging technology. And really, I also think AI is going to help this generation of students who are incredibly tech savvy be able to solve world problems that we've never been able to solve before. As long as they know how to leverage it, they know the misinformation, the bias, the things, right? The good, bad, and the ugly, like I say, that come with AI. Instead of just going to ChatGPT and say, hey, do these math problems for me, or write this 5-paragraph essay that kids are currently doing right now. We know they're doing it. How can we then have students actually problem solve with AI? How can we actually have them create with AI so it's not this scary thing when they go into the workforce or they go into their technical or their 4-year university experience?
Jenny, that kind of raises the next question. How do you distinguish between students using AI and students mastering it responsibly?
Yeah, it's been really interesting because I think we talk a lot about so for example, right, if we had used AI to come up with all the questions that we talked about today, is that cheating on a radio show? And, what we really talk about is it's the end product that becomes the most important. And the end product is this human-to-human conversation that we're having right now. And potentially we use AI to give us some talking points or give us a summary or have us think deeper about some questions. So I think for us as adults, we have the skills to kind of determine and critically think about how can AI enhance what I'm capable of doing so that I'm able to go out and show the world what I have for my potential. And unfortunately for our kids, I think a lot of them are in this system where they do not find their learning to be relevant or meaningful in any way to them. And therefore, what they're really functioning on is this idea of points and grades and scores. So for them, if points becomes the game and grades become the game, I will, to be honest with you, the best way to get those points and grades is probably using AI to get the perfect answers, to get the perfect points, and to get the perfect grades. And if we ask who's to blame for that system, it's all of us collectively, of us saying that this is a system that we continue to let operate in our country. So if we want to do something different, if we want to teach kids how to enhance their potential using the components of AI, it's definitely that AI literacy that Britni is just an absolute expert at. But additionally to that, we have to help creating more engaging and relevant learning experiences so that students can see AI as a way to improve themselves and not a way to cheat their way through a system to get points or grades. So I think for us, that's just a very high level thing, right? There's so many different components that you have to work and to put into place to help students understand and see how AI can actually enrich our lives instead of draw back from their ability to create that potential within themselves.
So how do you, and I guess I'd open this to both of you, is what evidence and how have you seen it in action? How does that come across where you have the students that are more confident and engaged in a LIFToFFS classroom versus a traditional classroom? What are you seeing to know that's happening?
Yeah, and maybe, Brett, I'll explain a little bit about what we see in traditional, and then do you want to maybe explain a little bit about what we see in LIFToFFS when teachers kind of make that jump? So thinking a little bit about a traditional classroom, as a school psychologist, I've spent a lot of times observing in classrooms to watch what is really unfolding. And for our teachers, a lot of them are on that hamster wheel of test prep. They're on that hamster wheel of chasing those standardized test scores because of that pressure. So for teachers, the most economically efficient way, right, to achieve that is to stand at the front of the room and to deliver a program to the students that they have been guaranteed will work for those students, and to hope and cross your fingers that those students are going to be fully ready, fully motivated, fully engaged. They're going to take in that information on that first round, and they're going to be able to spit it back out in their homework and spit it back out on that test. And I think when we interact with teachers who are in that type of a system, we see teachers, just to be clear, that are extremely passionate, very, very invested in their learners, very invested in this calling of education, but they also have that sense that there's no way for me or all of my students to be successful within this model. So you not only see a lot of apathy at the middle school and high school level, but you also see a ton of chronic absenteeism in the state of Wisconsin, and you see a lot of behavior problems problems and dysregulation in our elementary schools. So, Megan, talking about charter schools, you might not know, but by 2030, the national projection is that 50% of our nation's children will no longer be enrolled in public education. And that means it's an epidemic of teachers, students, administrators, and community members saying, hey, that traditional classroom, it's not working and it also doesn't feel good. And I don't want my kid to participate in that anymore.
Yeah, and I would say from just like what we're seeing from like these LIFToFFS classrooms, not only are more confident and excited teachers, I mean, we have teachers that are have been teaching for 30 years that are saying, man, I'm going to stay in this game, right? So not only is their passion and their excitement coming through to their kids, but we're seeing kids take so many risks when it comes to now collaborating with peers. They're taking risks in their curiosity and exploration. I was just in a classroom where kids were working together to try to build a prosthetic arm because they were learning about the muscles and tendons, and this is in 7th grade. And the students are like, well, this cardboard is not a hinge. We can't get it to be a hinge joint. And I'm like, well, kudos for knowing a hinge joint in 7th grade. But they went to the 3D printer and they designed using Tinkercad a hinge joint that mimicked a human joint, printed it, and then put it in the elbow area of this prosthetic arm. So you're just seeing such engagement happening when the actual learning is happening with kids instead of to kids. Or the teacher standing in the front of the room giving a one-size-fits-almost-none lesson, where when we truly step back and we start to tailor and we start to really, truly personalize the learning experience for kids, yes, that may be by an AI-powered platform, but it's really, truly about just allowing there to be more choice and voice, demonstration of mastery, how we actually give assessments. You're seeing kids that actually enjoy coming to class. We have an 8th grade ELA teacher who's one of our pioneers in the LIFToFFS Learning classrooms. We just pulled her data. So when we talk about success stories, we also talk about student achievement, right? We still do have to make sure students are achieving and they're growing in their growth. Her average growth right now is 700% more than the expected rate of improvement for 8th grade in ELA. And mind you, a lot of 8th graders don't really love ELA, right? So we're seeing kids that are excited. They're engaged. They're making podcasts about what they're reading and the author's theme and voice and choice. In what they're seeing and feeling and working with classmates. I love the confidence question because now when students are able to freely move at their pace and they're able to actually feel like they're getting their questions asked, whether that's from their teacher in a one-on-one way or they're feeling confident because they just mastered something in their Khan Academy or in their Alex Math or whatever their platform they're using. We have students that traditionally were pull-out students that were not receiving that tier 1 kind of in that regular education setting. One of the teachers just told me, she's like, it was one of the most amazing experiences of my career because I looked over and one of those students who received special education support, typically who has an aide in the classroom, was actually turned and talked and taught concepts to a child that was like, I'm stuck, I don't understand slope. And this child turns and is teaching their classmate what the slope-intercept form is. So, I mean, you're empowering your learners to actually be the drivers of what's happening in the classroom versus the adult being the sole driver of what's happening.
So how does the initiative then take that excitement and that level of knowledge and learning that you've just mentioned and direct it towards a meaningful career path for students?
Yeah, I think that's the super exciting part for us. We have been kind of exploring what does that look like. We have pathways for learning, we have career-connected learning, but a lot of times, a lot of our rural districts, they don't have that access and availability to the world is our oyster type of learning, right? Like growing up in small rural towns, I knew I could be a nurse or I could be a teacher. And so now for the first time, they have this ability to connect to deeper levels of, I'm interested in this career pathway or that. And so we've actually partnered with with a company called Defined Learning, and their whole mission is providing more of that project-based learning. But on the back end of things, it's about providing virtual internships. It's providing the ability for students to access a virtual job board. Our vision is to create a Wisconsin at Work page where every business in the state of Wisconsin is represented, and all a child has to do is click on, hey, I really want to be a backpack engineer. Is there any factories? Is there any companies in the state of Wisconsin that do that? And now they can find that. They can actually take virtual internships with that company. They can apply like a simulated job. They can take classes that actually build those durable, transferable skills that they're going to need to be successful in their career.
Jenny, anything you want to add to that?
Just that I think we are supporting students. There's a huge gap in terms of what students, how students used to choose a job. I don't know about you, but, even when I went to school, there were hundreds of thousands of jobs available out there, and I learned about maybe 5 or 6. And it's well documented in our research that there's a huge gap between the number of careers students know and the number of careers that they would actually be really good at. So for us, what we really intend to do is focus on that durable skill development, because we shouldn't be having students graduate feeling like this is the one career I'm going to do forever. We want them to graduate saying, I am so capable. These are all of the micro-credentials I have. These are all of the skills that I can bring. And I know that I can flexibly cluster these skills into different packages. And I am qualified for so many careers in so many different fields. And I might even create a field myself. And that's the type of confidence that we want every single student in Wisconsin to graduate with, because that brings back some tremendous Wisconsin economic viability to all of our communities.
And with that, we're going to take our final break. You're listening to Biz Talk with SCORE on WHBY, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Biz Talk with SCORE on WHBY. I'm Rick Sense along with Megan Mulholland, and we are having a wonderful conversation today with our guests, and we'll get back to that in just a little bit. But first, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. Haling & Associates helps small businesses and individuals not just prepare tax returns, but plan for the future. Haling & Associates, personal connection, positive results. Wherever you are in life or the life of your business, Johnson Financial Group works to match the banking and wealth services needed to help you complete your mission. Thank you to the Business News for promoting our program in the biweekly business newspaper serving Northeast Wisconsin with the latest business news and topics for the region. We are grateful for the support of Community First Credit Union. At its core, Community First Credit Union is a community of member owners where people work together to improve their financial well-being and to help one another. New North, the Regional Marketing and Economic Development Corporation, is an active supporter of SCORE. The New North facilitates economic growth and helps people in this region live their best lives. Since 1919, Baird has guided families through investment, trust, estate, and tax planning advice. So no matter what the future brings, you can be confident you're ready because your family is Baird's focus. We'd also like to thank and recognize the David L. and Rita E. Nelson Fund within the Community Foundation for the Fox Valley region for their generous donation to Biz Talk and SCORE. And with that, before we get into our last question, Britni or Jenny, either one of you can answer this. How can people out there that want to learn more, to understand more, where can they go to get that information?
So we have a website, LIFToffsLearning.com, and we are, we're there. We've got all of our information there, and we will make sure that, we've got our website kind of updated and we've got all the contact information for you guys. So we're around, and we were just in Oshkosh. We kind of travel all over the state, interacting with people and speaking at different events.
Okay, and I guess for the last question of the show, I guess I'll throw out the ubiquitous "so what's next" question to you both. What's next for LIFToFFS Learning?
Yeah, I think what's next for us that we're really excited about is, this in Wisconsin, we really started with just a few superintendents and just a few very passionate individuals, us included with our team. And we really wanted to say we want something different for Wisconsin. And throughout that journey of trying to figure out what it is that we want for Wisconsin, we discovered already that there is a national movement that has been already underway for years and years that has touched other states, some more than others, but everyone across the country is asking for this change. And research even says about 71% of American families want something different offered to them. So I think for LIFToFFS Learning Collaborative, what we really want is we want to help translate that national movement to Wisconsin so that the people of Wisconsin can say, of that national movement, how do we make that something that's homegrown? And how do we make something that works for the future of our state and of our children? And yesterday, Britni and I had the great experience to be in Michigan and to see some legislators there propose the 21st Century Learning Bill in Michigan, which is going to give schools across the entire state 5 years to innovate their districts and use some funding to support that. So this is possible and it is happening. And I think what we always just remember is that no one is coming to save us. If we want our public education, charter education, private education, homeschool options to be better in this state, we need to band together regardless of political affiliation, regardless of business or walk of life, and say we want to collectively make this happen for our students. And that's where LIFToFFS Learning Collaborative is going next.
Yeah, and I would just add, the biggest thing that we're looking for here is to just band together those folks across the state of Wisconsin, whether that's superintendents, leaders, business owners, industry partners. We really want to band together and create a think tank, a Wisconsin level think tank, where we are bringing together those folks, putting them in a room in a safe place just to start to ask the questions and to explore what does innovation actually look like and what does the school system redesign look like to guarantee all of those experiences for every learner to ensure that Wisconsin is economically viable now and in the future.
Well, this has been a great program. I appreciate both you, Jenny and Britni, for being on. Again, it's Britni Walz, Chief Impact Officer, and Jenny Riggle, Chief Information Officer for LIFToFFS Learning. And if you want to get more information, go to their website. It's been a great program. There's a lot of things that we can do in Wisconsin, and I think we just are starting to discover that with Britni's and Jenny's help this morning. So thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next week. Thank you.